Hello, my fellow gnomes, and welcome to episode 10 of our Tower Defense series. It's a big number, we're in the double digits, and we're cruising through this series. So let's hit the stop and get right into this, because I think it's going to be quite an exciting episode, because we're going to be adding some gold to our game. So we can actually have to purchase those towers, and we'll receive gold in turn for killing the mobs. So let's go to our on player added script inside of server script service. And just after the player added event, but before the character added one, we're going to add in some new lines. And what we'll do is we're going to add in a new int value to store the value of the gold. So we'll create a variable called gold, and we'll set this equal to a new instance of an int value. An int value, you might remember we've used this already with our towers inside of the config folder. We had these int values over here. It's just an object that allows us to store a number. So we're going to use one of them, and we'll set the gold.name, because at the moment when it's just created a new instance, it's by default, it'll just be called int value. So we'll give it a name of gold, and then we'll give it a value, and this will be however much we want them to start however much money you want them to start the game with. So I'm going to say 250, so hopefully they can buy a couple of units. And then we'll parent this new int value to the player, so it'll be directly inside of them. So now if I click play again, and while the game is running, if I look in the Explorer, inside players, inside my player, I should see this new int value here. And if I look inside of it, you can see it says 250 gold. Now, if you wanted, you could use something called Leaderstats here, so that it actually appears automatically next to your name on the leaderboard. I don't really want to do that though. I just want to have my own custom UI, so I'm not going to bother with that. But you could easily set it up to do so if you wanted. Now, the next thing you want to do is actually award gold when one of our towers kills a mob. So if we head into our tower module script, and we're going to go and find the tower.attack function. So this is what deals with all the attacking. And we need to access the player's gold, but we don't have access to the player inside of this function. But if we remember when we spawn the tower, we actually do get the player because it's being sent by this remote event of ours. So as soon as we already have this player here, let's send this information to the tower attack function. So we'll add on another parameter here, a comma, and then we'll put the player variable. So we'll send that information to the attack function. And so then in the attack function, we'll be expecting that. So we'll add in a player as well. And make sure as well that we then call this at the end of the function. Remember, it's just a recursive function, so it keeps calling itself. Want to add this down at the bottom here as well. So there we go. We've got that there, and when we're actually calling the function initially. And now we've got all of this. Let's actually check. So this is just giving out damage, but we want to check if they've killed them. So we'll say if target.humanoid.health is less than or equal to 0, because this is just dealing damage, and then we'll check after that. Is it a 0? Are they dead? And if they are dead, we'll use that player variable, so we can say player.gold.value, and we'll say plus equals, so we'll add to whatever the current value is, and you can make this whatever you like. You could put +1, plus 10 points or something, but what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to give them in points, however many health, or the max health of that enemy. So I'm going to say target.humanoid.max health. So I think a zombie in my game has 10 max health, so I'll get 10 points for zombie. And then the boss, I think, has like 100 health, so they will get 100 points for killing them. And if they just do some damage, but it doesn't kill them, then they won't get any points at all. So let's hit play and see if that's working now. So remember, we look inside again. We've got 250 gold. I'm going to place down my slinger over here. And hopefully when he starts killing these, let's see. Yep, down in our value now, we've got 280 gold. Because we've got 10 gold for each of the zombies we killed. Fantastic. So that's the easy bit out of the way. Now what we need to do is make these towers actually cost gold. So I'm going to hit stop and we're going to head back into our towers folder, and we actually need to set some prices for all these guys. So using our config folder again, we're going to add in a new int value into here. We're just going to call this price. Oh, sorry. We're going to name the new value. Sorry, we'll name the value price. And then the value will be however much we want it to be. So the slinger, I'm going to make him worth 100. And then we'll copy this and add this into the other folders as well for our magician and our brute. So our brute is kind of the next level up in a way. So maybe he's going to be worth 150 possibly. And then we'll copy final one into the magician's config folder. And we'll set his price to be equal to, I'm thinking 250. The magician is kind of like our top tier unit. At least that's the way I'm thinking of it. So then now we want those prices to be displayed for our GUI. So we're going to head into our starter GUI folder and open up that game controller script. Well, actually, before we do, we're going to want to edit our template button, aren't we? So remember we created this template button that we set to invisible. So let me just enable that again. We'll make it visible. And inside of it, we're going to want to add in a new text label. And we'll call this text label, we'll name this price, something like that. And then we'll position it where I want it to be. So we don't want it to be 200 by 50 pixels. Instead, we want it to be 100% of the width, no extra pixels, maybe 0.2 of the height, and no extra pixels again. So 10, 0.20, something like that. And then we'll position it so it's 0.8 of the way down. So it sort of sits at the bottom like that. We will make it fully invisible background, like so. And then the font we'll set to Oswald, seeing as that's what we've been using. We'll make the text scaled. And then what I might do is I might make the color white, but then I'll give the text stroke transparency. I'll set that to 0. So it's going to give it a sort of white text with a black outline like so. So that's what we're going to use to set our price. The current text, obviously it doesn't matter because we're going to be setting this in our script, but we just set this to 0 or something. And that's going to be our template. So we'll hide the template again now. If we can find it, here it is. We'll set that to invisible, untick that, and head back into our game controller local script. And if we scroll down to where we created those buttons, here we are. We're going to now want to set the text of that price text label. So just before we set the parent, I'm going to add in a new line and we'll say button.price.text, and that'll be equal to the config, because we've already got this config variable, the config folder of the towers, config.price.value. So now if we click play, we should see the different prices displayed. So we've got 100, 250, and 150 next to each of them. And so that works, that's fantastic, but they're not really in the right order, are we? We probably want them in ascending order or something. And if I hit stop and play again, I'm probably going to get them in a completely different order. Yeah, this time I've got 150, 250, 100. They're just going to be in a completely random order. So the way to sort that, we've actually already got in the list element. So if I open up the GUI while the game's running, and I'll just show you inside of here, inside towers, if I was to select this UI list layout, you see we've got this thing called sort order, which at the moment is set to layout order. And if we remember, we set the titles layout order to 0, and we set all of these to 1. But if we set, say, the brute is currently set to 1, but if we set his to 10, what would happen is he would go right to the bottom. So in order to have these all nicely ordered according to price, what we can do is set that layout order from our script now. So we can say button dot layout order. And we're going to set this equal to the value of the price as well. So now when I hit play, they should be sorted in the correct order. There we are, 100, 150, 250. And if we look inside my GUI again, we should now see that the slinger, his layout order, is 100. Obviously, these are pretty high numbers. Technically, he would only need to have a layout order of 2. But this is an easy way to do it just using those price values, seeing as we've already got them in our code. So fantastic. Now we've got them all set up. All we need to do is have it actually cost money when we click one of these down. Now, we could handle this from our local script, but we probably don't actually want to do that. Now, the reason for that is that local scripts, they run on the client. Now, the client is the individual player device, and we probably don't want to trust them with handling the amount that they spend, because it could be very open to abuse, and they could exploit, and they could then place however many they wanted or choose how much they wanted to pay, which is obviously not what we want to have happen. So instead of having this logic like with the max towers as well inside of our local script, we're going to trust this to the server instead, much more trustworthy. So into our tower module script, where we've got this tower spawn, well, we're actually going to create a new function just below it, and we'll call this function tower.checkSpawn. Okay, so this is going to sort of like grant permission on whether or not they're allowed to place it, and also on how much it costs and whether they can afford to place it. So the two parameters this will expect is the player who's requesting it, the player, and the name of their tower. Oh, let's just move this down a line. So this remote event is linked to this function, and then we can have this one below it. There we go. So once we've done that, what we're going to do is we're actually going to take, remember here where we checked if the tower exists, we're actually going to take that. So we'll copy this and we'll put it into our check spawn function. There we go. Because you don't really want your one function to be doing multiple things. So at the moment, this function is checking if it exists and also spawning it. Whereas we should probably have a whole different function, like this one here, to check if it exists and if they're allowed to place it. So we're sort of splitting off our logic into two different places to organize things a little bit better. So once we've checked if the tower exists, then let's check if they can afford it. So if that existing tower dot config dot price dot value, if that is less than or equal to that player's, so the player dot gold dot value, then that means they can afford it, doesn't it? Because if the price is 250 and the player's got 250 gold, then that is fine. So that's good. And then the next thing you want to do is check if they have reached the maximum limit. Because remember, we were checking this on the client with these place towers and max towers values, but we probably want to do this on the server as well to give an authoritative kind of voice on the matter. So what we'll probably do for this is we'll go back into our onPlayerAdded script, and just like we created these int values for the gold, well, we can do the same thing now, but for the placed towers. So if I copy all of this and just below, paste that all in again, and instead of calling it gold, we call this placed towers, and copy and paste, paste, paste. And the initial value will of course be 0. The name we'll call placed towers. And obviously it's still an int value, so everything else is the same there. So that's creating the value. And then now inside the tower module, we will check if the player dot placed towers dot value is less than, because it actually has to be less than now. It can't just be sort of, it can't just be equal to, it actually has to be less than. So if it's less than the less than 10 is what we wanted our limit to be, then we know they're allowed to place it. Now we could hard code it 10 in, or we could create a variable at the top, which I think I'm probably going to do. So at the very top, let's create a new variable. We'll just call this local max towers. We'll set this to a global variable and 10. So it makes it easier to edit our script, and we can just open it up and see this value right here. So then I can use this max towers variable down here. Less than max towers is 10. Then we'll just return true. And if that isn't the case, then else, maybe we will warn that the player has reached the max limit. And we could do the same here for the price. We could say else, and we could warn player cannot afford. And we could also do it down here for this if statement, checking if it exists. Else warn that tower does not exist. Okay, so now I've got all of this logic for checking the spawns, but we haven't actually called this function from anywhere. So in order to actually bring this function to life, we're going to trigger it from the client again. But instead of using a remote event like we did last time, we're going to use something new called a remote function. So we're going to add in a new folder to replicated storage, and I'm going to call this functions. This is just how I like to organize things. And in there, we'll add in a remote function, and we're going to call this the request tower function. Request tower. And so now inside of our local script, so just like we've got this one for the events, well, we can copy and paste that and create one for the functions. Just making sure we modify it like so. So it points to our functions folder. And then once we've done that, we can create a variable for the request tower function. And that will be equal to the functions, wait for child, and the name of it, which is request tower. So once we've done that, we'll copy the name of it. And we're going to scroll down, scroll all the way down to when they click this button right here. Remember, we were just checking on the client if they had placed the maximum amount of towers, and then straight away adding a placeholder. Well, instead of doing that, let's call that remote function into action. So remote functions are a little bit different because instead of just broadcasting a message out, it actually receives information back as well. So we can say local allowed to spawn, and we'll set that equal to our request tower function. And then we're going to colon invoke the server. And when we do that, we're going to send the tower.name as the information. And now instead of checking this, we're going to check if we were allowed to spawn. So if that equals true, then we'll add in the placeholder. Because if you remember, in our tower script, we actually return true here. So if we return true, then we will do. Otherwise, let's just put at the very bottom, return false. So otherwise, it'll be false, it'll send back, and it's not going to be spawning one in. So once we've done that, we actually need to take away the gold. So inside of our tower function, when we spawn over here, let's stop checking if the tower exists. Instead, let's call the allowed to spawn thing again. So rename this to allowed to spawn, and then that will be set to this function. Copy that and paste it in like so. There we go. And then we will use this variable instead now. So that makes sense. So we're checking inside of the spawn function still. And then obviously we haven't got this tower exists variable anymore, but we know, now that we know that it does exist, we can just say replicated storage dot towers, and the name of it inside square brackets is just the name that we've been given. because we know we've already checked with the check spawn function that it does exist. So once we've done that, we can then scroll down, and after we've done all the physics stuff, let's go about giving them gold. So the player dot gold dot value will be minus equals the new tower dot config dot price dot value, and then we'll change their place towers value as well. So player dot placed towers. Oh, I need the T in there. Place towers dot value, and we'll set this to plus equals. So we're going to add 1, and there we go. So hopefully we've got all of that right. Let's click play and test everything is working for us. So there we go. We'll click play, and we're going to open up inside of the players because we haven't actually got any GUI for it yet. So you can see I've got 250 gold and the place towers is 0. Let's place this guy down. And, oh, no, we have got a problem. We've got a problem here. What's going on? I got a little bit carried away with myself there. I actually forgot to set up the remote function on the tower server-side script. So just like we got here, where we get the on-server event, and we connect it into the tower.spawn function, we need to do the same thing for the check spawn function. So let's create some variables first of all, so we can copy them over from the game controller script, remember? So we need one for the functions and one for the actual function itself. So I'm just going to paste them in here. So there we go. And now I've got this variable for the request tower function. Right down at the bottom, underneath this check spawn function, I'll say request tower function dot on server invoke. And instead of using the connect statement like you do for remote events, remote functions are a little bit different. All you need to type is you just say equals and the name of the function, which is tower dot check spawn. And you don't even want these brackets on the end, so get rid of them. And it should just look like that. So now when we hit play, and we can open up our player's information again. And now when we spawn one in, there we go. We can spawn it in, click, and our place towers has gone up by 1. Our gold is going up. And if I spawn in another one over here, we're going to be able to. And a third one. But if I try and spawn in a fourth one, we can see down the output, it now says player cannot afford, because our gold is only 50 right now, and we can't actually afford to place anymore. So once we've got a few more kills, there we go. We can see now it's 155, so we can add another guy here, and we can start to continue. Obviously, we don't really want to just have everything consigned down to the output down there, so we're going to need to add in some little basic GUI at the top. I think we're going to dedicate maybe the next episode to making some more advanced GUI. So just for now, we're going to add in a very basic little box on the top. So inside of our game GUI, add in a text label, and we'll just position this right in the center, I think. So position 0.5 of the way across, and we'll just make it minus 100, seeing as it's a 200 pixel box. We'll just leave it like that. And then we'll just set the text equal to however much they have, and the font to Oswald, and the text to scaled. Oh, and the name of it. The name of it we want to set not to text label, but to gold. So then inside of our game controller script, all we have to do is update that text box's label. So let's go about and actually access the player's int value for their gold. So we're going to actually need a variable for the players first of all. So do this at the very top of the script. The players service game get service players, and now we can create a variable for the local player. Local player equals players dot local player, and then we can get their gold. Well, in fact, we don't need the local player necessarily, so we can just set one to the gold equals players dot local player, and then we'll wait for child, wait for that gold int value to be created. And once it is, then we can set about updating it. So let's create a function to do that. Local function update gold. And all this does is it'll say GUI.gold.text equals the current gold.value. And we're going to want to run this immediately when the game starts. So just underneath it, we're going to immediately call the function. And then we're also going to want to run it whenever that value changes. So gold.changed, and we'll connect it to the update gold function. There we go. And that's all we need to do. So now when we hit play, we should see at the top, there we go. We've got 250 gold. We can place one down and it goes down to 160. We can place another guy down. It goes down to 30. And we can actually see how much money we've got in the game. We can see it going up as we get these kills. We've got a little bit of feedback. So now if you click into place, you won't be surprised that you can't afford it. Maybe later on we'll add in some pop-ups or something. But there we go. We've got our money system fully integrated on the server side. So we know it's nice and secure. We're not just aimlessly trusting the client, hoping they're going to be honest. And in the next episode, we really need to jazz up some more of this GUI, I think. Make it look a little bit nicer. And also put some information about what the wave currently is as well. Because that's, again, it's consigned down to the output, which our players aren't going to be able to see, are they? But that's for another episode. So thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and why not even consider subscribing. And I'll see you all in the next episode. Goodbye.